Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time it's another installment in the series of videos I like to call Thoughts On, where I give you my thoughts on a particular series of films or a particular franchise of films, and I do it in a way that's more condensed, it's more to the point. I just give you my thoughts on the films as a whole, in a way that isn't as in-depth or as detailed as some of my earlier solo reviews or the reviews that you're used to. It's a way for me to kind of let people know who are curious about my thoughts on certain franchises know all in one video about it. Also, it's a way for me to also discuss certain films in a franchise that I either didn't review or I didn't discuss earlier, or also a way for me to kind of just talk about some films that my opinion might have changed since the last time that I did a review or a discussion or a video about those films. So, I personally thought this would be a wonderful appetizer for you guys in the lead up to my upcoming review of Spider-Man Homecoming. I thought it would be a great, fun video to do, to discuss and give my thoughts on the Spider-Man films, the Spider-Man franchise, leading up to Homecoming. And that's precisely what this video is. And the Homecoming review is something that I know a lot of my subscribers have been wanting to see. They're really curious to hear my thoughts on the film. And I will have that review up sometime tomorrow. But for the time being, I hope you enjoy this video. And without further ado, let's get started. Let's get started on talking about the cinematic exploits of your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. So, I'm going to give you a little bit of a backstory on this first discussion, this first film that I'm going to be talking with you guys about. The first film I'm talking about is technically the first Spider-Man film to be released in theaters, 1977 Spider-Man. Now, 1977 Spider-Man got a limited theatrical release in some theaters in the US and overseas. That's because it was not really a studio film, even though Columbia Pictures, I think, released it. It was not a studio-produced film. It was a TV pilot for a 1977 live-action TV series called The Amazing Spider-Man. Now, this is not an official DVD. This is a bootleg DVD, but it's a pretty good one, I have to admit. And to be honest, I think this entire show is fairly underrated. I know it gets a lot of crap from people nowadays for not following the comics down to the letter. I know a lot of people say it's one of the worst adaptations of a comic book character. I know a lot of people say it sucks because of its cheesy effects and because of the fact that there are no Spider-Man villains in it. I want to give a little rebuttal to that before I talk about my thoughts on the TV movie, the TV pilot that was released in theaters. And my rebuttal is this. For the time period, the effects were state-of-the-art. It's not fair to judge a show or a film, especially its special effects, on what effects look like today. It's not fair to go in and look at the special effects from 2017 or even 1987 versus 1977 and a TV show budget. It's not fair. It's not fair to the show. It's not fair to the movie. It's not fair, period. And it's not really showing proper judgment. I just see this all the time. It's this lazy bullshit of just labeling something as cheesy and, well, that's it. It's a low-hanging fruit to just rag on this film's effects. And it just upsets me because it's like a lot of people just do not have any perspective on this. Another problem, and the other criticism I see a lot for this show, is that it's such a shitty adaptation of the comics. because there's no comic book villains in it. Spider-Man isn't a teenager. Well, at the time period, Spider-Man wasn't a teenager anyway. In the comics, he was already in college. So it made sense that the comic adaptation for the TV series would also have Spider-Man, Peter Parker, attending college at the time, not being a teenager. Also, with the villains, this isn't anything different than what the Incredible Hulk TV series was doing at the time, or the Wonder Woman TV series was doing. What comic book villains were in the Incredible Hulk show with Bill Bixby? What comic book villains were in the Wonder Woman show with Linda Carter? Maybe there were some. I don't remember because I'm not really that big of a fan of that show. But Incredible Hulk got praised, and it's still praised to this day by a lot of comic book fans, and it doesn't have Hulk villains in it. So it's one of those things that's like, I don't get it. It's like if you're gonna criticize a show and say it sucks because there's no comic book villains in it, but you're also gonna praise the Incredible Hulk show. I mean, it's like it's one of those things. It's like, why are you not judging this show the same way that you would with the Incredible Hulk TV series? And you also have to put things into perspective in regards to the particular model that this film was this film and this entire series was following. They were following the successful model that the network that this show aired on had followed, which was to have these adaptations of these comic book characters and to adapt them in a way where it doesn't alienate your average Joe audience who doesn't know anything about the comics. So what they did is they decided to have just regular villains, villains that were not comic book villains, to make the show a bit more realistic to people and open it up to a more wider audience. It was copying the same model that worked for the Incredible Hulk and Wonder Woman. It made sense that they would have copied the same model that was working for the studio, for the company at the time, for the channel. Now it's just I just gotta throw that. I had to throw it out there. I mean, whenever you see a video about this particular show, a lot of the time it's just a riff. Somebody's just riffing on it, or somebody's just ragging on it, or somebody's just taking a giant shit on it. And a lot of people are just using these lazy reasonings as to why it's bad. And a lot of people just accept that and don't really do their own research and really see, put themselves in the shoes of somebody who would have seen the show back when it originally aired. I know that's difficult to do, but if you're going to judge a show, judge it based against its peers. Judge its limitations or what it does versus the type of shows that were airing on TV at the time. That's all I'm saying. I don't think it's fair to judge the show, oh, it has cheesy effects, it doesn't have the comic book villains, so automatically it sucks and it's the worst Spider-Man ever. I mean, this is a masterpiece compared to Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark or Spider-Man Rocks at Universal. But anyway, I just had to get that off my chest. Now, when it comes to the TV movie itself, when it comes to Spider-Man, the pilot for the Amazing Spider-Man TV series, I like it okay. I think it's an alright start. It's a decent start to a TV series. I am not in love with it. It's a time waster for me. I think a lot of it is because I do have some nostalgic memories associated with it. But at the same time, I do find it interesting. I do find it an interesting show and an interesting TV pilot because you compare this with a lot of the other Spider-Man movies to come after this, it does stand out, for better or for worse, because you got an adult Peter Parker, played by Nicholas Hammond, who I think is a definite positive. I really like Nicholas Hammond. I think he really does capture the spirit of Peter Parker really well in this TV movie, in this pilot, and in the entire series. I don't mind the costume design. I think it's actually quite good for the time. I really think the stunt work by Fred Waugh and company is absolutely spectacular. This pilot and this entire series, for me personally, features the best wall crawling scenes and effects I've seen out of any Spider-Man film or TV series to date. I mean, I could say, the animated series is better in terms of the wall crawling stuff, but live action, in terms of a live action sequence where Spider-Man is scaling a wall, this series is the best for me personally, because it was done for real. Fred Waugh deserves a lot more credit for his hard work on this TV pilot and this entire series. This is a guy who got in the Spider-Man suit, hooked himself to a harness that's attached to a fucking crane, and actually climbed the side of a building. He's actually scaling up these buildings. You get to see some really impressive POV shots of his webbed hands on the building. You know, he actually scaled up the side of a skyscraper in one of these episodes of this series. It's really impressive. And it deserves a lot more credit. Because this isn't CGI. This isn't a CGI stunt double climbing up the CGI wall. This isn't, some camera tricks where you have the floor, he's climbing on a flat surface and then they just flip the camera up. No. He actually did scale the side of buildings, skyscrapers. It's impressive. And when Spider-Man is swinging around, it's actually a stuntman who's actually swinging around. You could say, oh, it's a rope. It doesn't look like web, all you want. But he's actually swinging around the city on an actual rope around the city from building to building. And he's also scaling these buildings with his, he has a harness and he's attached to a crane. It doesn't make what he's doing any less impressive, though. It really doesn't. I love the music for this series. I know a lot of people criticize it because it sounds like porn music. Every show in the 70s had music like this. This type of music was popular on the radio and on the album charts. Why do you think porn music in the 70s sounded the way it did? It sounded the way it did because that's what was popular. That was the type of music that was popular back then. It wasn't just special. It wasn't just attributed solely to pornos from the 70s. I mean, I used to have the same kind of mindset until I did some research and thought about it. And then I'm like, you know what? Just because I hear bounce, chicka, wow, wow, doesn't mean that it's porno music. It just means it's 70s music. There's a difference. And this is some really impressive 70s music. Very catchy theme. I thought it actually added some nice mood and atmosphere at times when it's supposed to be kind of eerie. And it's also great to listen to when it's supposed to be all lighthearted and fun. I mean, I love the theme for this series. I think it's extremely underrated. It's captures the spirit, the fun, happy-go-lucky spirit of Spider-Man really well. If there's something that these 70s TV pilots that Marvel was a part of had in common, is they usually had some really catchy, great music. I mean, I didn't like the Red Brown TV movies where he played Captain America, but I love the music. And the same thing applies here. I love the score for this entire show. I think it's incredibly underrated. I really wish it was released officially on CD or even on iTunes, because I really do feel it's that solid of a score. And there were a few other things that I also liked about the film, the TV pilot. The action sequences, when they are there, I had some fun with them. Yeah, it's a lot of chop socky kung fu kind of action, but it has a certain charm to it. And there were some supporting characters. There's this guy who's kind of like he's he's kind of like the reporter guy who's trying to expose David Banner and trying to hunt him down in Incredible Hulk. There's the same kind of guy who's like a police chief in this, and I liked him. I like the dynamic he has between with Nicholas Hammond and so on. It was nice to see Lisa Elbacher in a really early role, and she had some great chemistry with Nicholas Hammond as a love interest. Sadly, she doesn't end up doing anything else in the series. This is kind of a one-off, which I thought was a little bit too bad. Also, I liked the general conflict of the TV pilot. It was there was this self-help guru guy played by Thayer David, and it's a really clever take, I thought, on the self-help guru that was really popular back in that particular time period. There's these new age type guys who were going around with these self-help seminars, and this is a great take on that because it puts a new spin on it and turns this self-help guru guy into a villain, into a bad guy. He's using his status as a self-help guru to manipulate the people who want his help, and he's doing it to blackmail them, to manipulate their minds, and try to get them to commit suicide. It was actually pretty dark for a 70s show at the time, and pretty ballsy, and I thought it was actually really well handled. So yeah, there's a lot of things that I actually liked about this TV pilot. The reason why I find it to be just average and a time waster, though, is because it does have a really slow pace. It's a slow paced show. It doesn't have a slow paced TV pilot. It's like an hour and a half, and there isn't enough Spider-Man. You know, I really felt it needed more scenes with Spider-Man. It was definitely disappointing in that regard. The stuff with the Daily Bugle I didn't think was that great either, because I personally don't think they made the right casting choice for J. Jonah Jameson. It had its moments, but overall I thought it was not as good as it could have been. And the ending I thought was a bit abrupt. It felt like everything was just solved a bit too quickly, and it just felt like they just kind of ran out of time, and they just decided to just end it as quickly as they possibly could. But overall, though, it's a time waster for me. I actually don't mind it. I actually like it more than the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie. I like it more than, I would say it's on par with The Amazing Spider-Man for me, and which is kind of interesting because it's the TV pilot for the Amazing Spider-Man TV series. It's not my favorite episode of the series. I would say I like the Deadly Dust two-parter a lot more, or the Captive Tower, and definitely the Chinese Web, which the Chinese Web might be my favorite out of the entire series, but I did really like the Captive Tower as well, and the Deadly Dust. But it's not a bad start. And it's not that bad of a TV pilot. I mean, especially for a 70s TV series. It's not as bad as its reputation suggests. I really do recommend it if you are a fan of the Incredible Hulk TV series or Wonder Woman. If you're a fan of those shows, I do recommend you giving this series and at least the pilot a watch. See what you think about it. If you like what you see, you have some fun with it, then I do recommend checking out the other episodes of the show if you can find them. I will definitely do a series. I will definitely do a video all about this series someday, because I really feel that would be a fun video to do, not only for me, but also because a lot of the videos about the show are just ragging on it. Really, it's just a lot of ragging on the show and not much else. And usually they just rag on the TV pilot. But anyway, that's my thoughts on the Amazing Spider-Man TV pilot, which was released in theaters as Spider-Man. Now we are on to the 2002 Spider-Man film by Sam Raimi, which was technically the first Spider-Man live-action feature film, because the 1977 Spider-Man film was a theatrical release of the TV pilot from the 1977 TV series, The Amazing Spider-Man. Now, this is a film that was super hyped when it came out. I mean, the hype was Batman 1989 levels of hype. I remember it fondly, and it's something that I will never forget because it was just enormous. An enormous amount of hype. At the time, the film lived up to it. I saw it on opening weekend when I was pretty young. So I saw it when I was definitely a lot younger on opening weekend with my parents. I remember a lot of the stuff that happened. There was this overweight guy who dressed up as Spider-Man, and there were these kids that were there at the screening, and they asked him questions. And one of the questions they asked was actually pretty cute. The kid asked, "Do you eat flies for breakfast?" And of course the guy's like, "No." So there's some fun stuff. It was a packed screening. And overall, and I do remember there was also somebody there that was like handing out merchandise and stuff like that to lucky people, in the audience who had the right number on their ticket. So yeah, it was a pretty big deal. And I loved it when I saw it in the theater. And because I was a huge Spider-Man film fan. I was a huge Spider-Man film fan. I liked the 70s movie. I love this, and I was a huge fan of the character. In a lot of ways, I still am. And this is one of those films that I watched religiously growing up. I watched this a lot. But as the years have gone by, and especially upon a recent revisiting of the film, I've come to the realization that this does not hold up well. That this does not hold up as well as I thought it was going to. And it's also a film that, when I look at it now, I actually think it's pretty disappointing. And I talked about this in an earlier review on my channel, but I just want to give you my condensed short thoughts on this one, because I want to keep it a little bit shorter. With the 70s TV movie, I didn't really talk about that before in a video, so that I wanted to take it as long as I felt was needed to discuss that. With this, I just want to keep it short and to the point. I'm not a big fan of this movie. I personally think it's a letdown. I think that there are some impressive sequences in the film, but it's a letdown because of quite a few factors. It feels like the plot is pretty rushed and half-assed. The villain sucks, and it's too bad because it's the Green Goblin, who's one of Spider-Man's greatest enemies. And I personally felt that William Dafoe was well cast. It was a great casting choice, and he was great when he wasn't chewing the scenery and being an embarrassing oaf in a Power Rangers villain outfit. But when he's doing that, when he's the itsy bitsy spider without the water spout, no, that's other bullshit. Acting like he's a fucking villain from Batman and Robin. When he's not doing that, he's fine. He's actually pretty intimidating. Should have toned it down, and the film would have been a lot better for it, and so would William Dafoe in terms of his performance, and the film would have benefited from that immensely. Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man and Peter Parker has not aged well. He can't tell a funny line to save his life, except for like one scene in the wrestling sequence that I kind of chuckled at. That's really about it. Other than that, he's a charisma vacuum underneath the mask. I don't like the dopey Peter Parker. I understand that's what they were basing it off, the 60s comic, and I've read the 60s comic, but I grew up with the 90s comic. I prefer the 90s version of Spider-Man, the one I saw in the animated series, or the one that I read in the comics at the time, over this dopey, dweeby, nerdy Peter Parker who's just a fucking loser. Okay, that really didn't hold up well at all. The portrayal of Peter Parker in this film, and in the entire Raimi series, to be perfectly honest. The love story between Mary Jane and Peter really didn't work. for me personally in this. I felt it wasn't really that sweet. They didn't have any chemistry. It just felt awkward, and it looked awkward. The action sequences, there were some that were quite good. I liked the sequences in the wrestling ring, the cage match with Macho Man Randy Savage. I thought that was fun. I love the sequence where Spider-Man is going after the guy who killed his Uncle Ben. I love the way that scene is shot. I love the way that's edited. It's very fluid. The movements are really well done. Raimi's direction is at its finest there. The climax, it has its moments. I love the way it's shot, but I don't like the way things are choreographed, because it just seems like it's just a one-sided affair where Spider-Man's just getting his ass handed to him by the Goblin. And he doesn't really have like a moment where it's like, wow, like he's really able to fight back, or gets like a moment that's a crowd-pleasing moment for Spider-Man to get his shots in on Goblin. He never really does that. I love the scene in the burning building, where Spider-Man's doing his best Neo impression and doing the flip, and the blades are flying by him, and I think that's a great looking effect. It's a cool scene. The parade scene doesn't work nowadays. It doesn't hold up that well. Some of the CGI hasn't aged very well, but that's understandable because it's the 2002 film. I don't mind some of the music that they have in the soundtrack. I love the score by Danny Elfman. I think that is easily one of the best things about the film. And that's one of the few things that is actually held up really well. I also think the costume design by James Acheson and company for the Spider-Man suit is top notch. I think that's really well done. And I felt they did a great job bringing the origin story to life, with the spider bite and everything. I didn't feel the high school scenes were very well done, though, because it just was very weird to watch, because all of these actors are clearly not high school. They're clearly not supposed to be in high school. They don't look like high schoolers. They look like they're in college. And so you have this weird sort of vibe where it's like you have all these actors that are clearly not the right age, and they're in high school. It was just I don't think the casting department did a very good job in regards to the casting of the high schoolers for Midtown High. But I thought Rosemary Harris was the perfect Aunt May. I thought Cliff Robertson did a really good job as Uncle Ben. And I also liked some of the supporting cast. James Franco I thought was a standout as Harry Osborn. But it just is a film that it's not as entertaining as I remember it being. There's not as much action as I thought there was. The villain is a fucking joke. They should have just went with the original suit design for Goblin that they were considering, where he actually does look like the Green Goblin, but they just thought it would be dumb for some reason. Why would Osborn actually dress up like a real goblin? That doesn't make any sense. That's stupid. No, it isn't. That's what Osborn did in the comic. Why are you changing shit? It's far-fetched that Osborn would dress up as a real goblin, but it's not far-fetched to believe that some teenager just randomly sewed this costume from scratch. It's a film that there are things about it I like, but there's a lot that I don't. And overall, I think it's a below-average affair. I know that stuns a lot of people, and I know this has a lot of fans, and that's fine. I have no problem with that. I'm keeping it for the collection. There's some good features on this disc, and I admit it. This is a type of film that doesn't hold up well. I can point to this film as proof that nostalgia does not always blind me. Does not always play a part in whether or not I enjoy a film. It plays a very small part, because I'm not a big fan of this one. I think this is easily one of the weakest Spider-Man films in the franchise, if not and also one of the weakest comic book films I can think of. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Spider-Man, the 2002 film. Shocking, but real honest thoughts on Spider-Man. Now we get to the sequel, Spider-Man 2. And this is a immense step up from the first film. I personally still find this one to be the best Spider-Man film to date. This actually held up really well upon a recent viewing. A lot of the problems I had with the first film were improved upon with this sequel, especially with the villain and especially with the action sequences. This still has the best action sequences out of the entire franchise. And that's counting Homecoming as well. And I'll talk about that more in depth in the next video. But yeah, the train sequence, there's other sequences, the countless fights that Spider-Man has with Octopus, with Doc Ock, and even just things like the operating room table sequence. I mean, all of that is really thrilling. The whole story of Spider-Man losing his powers and having to get them back, I actually thought was actually really well handled, and it was interesting. The pizza delivery scene was fun. Overall, I really did like this film quite a bit. For a film that's over 2 hours, I thought it was really well paced. Danny Elfman returns and does the score, and once again knocks it out of the park. The effects still hold up really well, unlike some of the effects in the 2002 film. I thought the romance between Mary Jane and Peter in this was actually kind of effective, and it makes Spider-Man 3 even more infuriating because it undoes a lot of that stuff. It breaks the strands that really held that web together. It's one of those films that critics loved at the time, and a lot of people consider to be one of the best comic book films, and it's one of those films that actually does live up to that moniker. It's a film that I don't really have a lot to really bad to say about it. I mean, I'm not going to spend that long talking about Spider-Man 2, because Spider-Man 2 is one of those films that does hold up really well. The action sequences, the performance by Alfred Molina as Dr. Octopus, the performances by the other cast members. I mean, I didn't mention this in the other my other discussion of Spider-Man, but I mean, the casting for J. Jonah Jameson is just absolutely perfect. I'm trying. What's that guy's name? I know. Fuck. Oh, God damn it! It's on the tip of my tongue. Who plays J. Jonah Jameson? I know I should fucking know this, but for some reason my brain is not working properly. It's all webbed up. It doesn't want to work for me. Oh, now I got it. J.K. Simmons. J.K. Simmons is the perfect J. Jonah Jameson, and he's a riot in this, and he was a riot in the first film. So, yeah, Rosemary Harris was strong as always as Aunt May, and there were some nice messages to be had in this film that were said in the film. And I like the whole aspect of the conflict with Doc Ock and the whole invention that he's trying to create, and all the chaos that it's creating. I really do feel that this is definitely, without a doubt, the best Spider-Man film to date. Does have issues though. I would say Peter Parker's still a dweeb, he's still a dork, and I really think that aspect of it really needed to be toned down. And I guess that's just what Raimi wanted out of the character, this mom and apple pie type, character. Like, he wanted Clark Kent. He wanted Peter Parker to be Clark Kent. Peter Parker is not Clark Kent. So, I'm still not a fan of that. It's everything else that really makes this film soar. It makes it swing above the others. It is because of these other elements that are so well done. The action sequences, the editing, the direction, the score, the overall story. There are things about it that don't work, like dopey Peter Parker shit. Sometimes the stuff with Mary Jane isn't really the best. Aunt May, I don't know. I mean, she's okay. James Franco seems like he's a bit underused in it. But thankfully there's no soap opera bullshit like there was in the third film with his character. And I don't really like the whole Doc Ock isn't really a bad guy thing at the end. But overall, still a spectacular, excellent sequel in its own right. And yeah, like I've said many times before in this particular part of this video, definitely still the best Spider-Man film for me. In terms of overall quality. Now we're on to the spectacular fail that is Spider-Man 3. Now, this is a film that I personally feel is not only the worst film in the Spider-Man franchise, but one of the worst comic book films, period. I really do believe that. There are very few things about this movie that I at all liked, let alone tolerated. Because this was just a total fucking fail on an epic scale. This is a film that spectacularly fell on its webbed ass in the most stunning way imaginable. And what's kind of crazy about this film is this is a movie that nowadays is a punchline, and it should be, and it deserves it. But before it was released, it was one of the most anticipated films of the year, if not of the entire decade. Spider-Man 3 was so hyped that you could argue that the hype before its release was as big as the hype for the first Spider-Man film, if not even bigger. Because people had already had an established core. You had the first film, which a lot of people enjoyed. You had the second movie, which critics and audiences enjoyed immensely. And then the third film, which was incredibly anticipated. And that shows in the film's box office, because this movie cost a record amount of money for the time, over $200 million. And it ended up doubling that budget. It broke even, at least, on opening weekend. And actually set records for the amount of money made over the weekend when it came out in theaters upon its initial release. And I saw it in the theater when it came out in IMAX. I rode the wave of hype, and when I walked out of the theater, I actually remember liking the film. Now, much to my surprise, my mom gets this for me at the video store, and I watch it again, and in the back of my head, this is a film that I enjoyed in the theater. I liked it. I had fun with it. And when I watch it on a home video, it is like a completely different experience. And I had not read any of the negative reviews beforehand, hadn't watched any videos about it, and there weren't very many. I mean, I didn't really watch YouTube that much, to be honest, when this film came out in 2007. I mean, that really was not that wasn't really something I did that much. Every now and then, maybe, but I don't remember watching a lot of reviews. But regardless, I was not corrupted at all by anybody's previous opinions on the film. I saw it, and I was crushingly disappointed. And just left completely speechless by how awful the film was upon my second viewing. And after that, I did not see the film again for a long time until recently, or a few years ago, a couple years ago, when I did my review and rant on the film. And I tried to watch it again, and I couldn't make it. I was just like, fuck it. No, my opinion has not changed on this one iota. I'm not going to sit through this shit again. So I gave up about halfway through. before I talk about the things, the just laundry list, the slew of problems I have with Spider-Man 3, I want to talk about some things about this that I actually liked. For one, the way they shot and handled the sequence where Spider-Man first sees himself in the black costume, I thought was actually well done. I think Thomas Hayden Church did a really good job as the Sandman. He was easily, in my opinion, the best character out of the entire film, and actually the most likable, which is crazy. I mean, in a film that it's a superhero film, it's a Spider-Man film, and the villain is more likable than the hero. I mean, how the fuck does that happen? It doesn't happen that often. This is a special kind of fail, folks, where the hero is less likable than one of the villains. Excuse me, I'm just getting indigestion just thinking about this fucking movie. And I think it's just, I just looked at this fucking Venom. You know, I looked at emo Peter Parker and it just made me want to hurl. Puke Dayglow all over the fucking screen. Anyway, let's get back to the things about it that I liked. Visual effects were pretty impressive. Especially the sequence where the Sandman is created. I think that is still a really impressive, jaw-dropping effect, and it still holds up really well. But then again, the movie cost over $200 million, so that should be a given, that it has impressive visual effects. But still, hey, it had impressive visual effects, I'll give it that. Some of the action sequences, I didn't mind. I didn't mind the first confrontation between Peter and the Hobgoblin, but not really. The not Hobgoblin, more like the Hairy Goblin, because that's really what he was. He's the Hairy Goblin. I didn't mind that first confrontation, and I liked the little scuffles that Spider-Man had with the Sandman in the film. And you know, J.K. Simmons was fun as always as J. Jonah Jameson. What little bit of J. Jonah there was in the film. That's it, though. That's all the praise I can sling at Spider-Man 3. Now here's all the shit that this film slings back at me. I'm going to start with the crippling flaw. The just absolute devastating blow when it comes to this film and its overall quality for me personally. And that is the screenplay by Sam Raimi, Ivan Raimi, and Alvin Sargent. It is one of the worst scripts I've ever seen when it comes to a comic book film. Batman and Robin was less of a clusterfuck than this movie is. It is one of the most disrespectful, lazy, half-ass fucking screenplays you will ever see in your life. This script and this entire film's story should serve as a lesson to other potential screenwriters on how not to write a screenplay for a successful franchise, let alone a comic book film. It's hard to believe that 3 writers collaborated and came up with something that is this fucking bad. But they did. It undoes almost all of the goodwill that the first 2 films built. It completely unravels it at the fucking seams. You have characters that were built up in the previous 2 films that are completely destroyed by the end of the film. For one, Mary Jane's character is irrevocably damaged beyond repair by this screenplay. She goes from being a character that didn't really work that well with Peter in the first film, but there was some progress that was made in the second movie, to a third film where her character is transformed into a total bitch from hell. Mary Jane in Spider-Man 3 is one of the most reprehensible, despicable, unlikable fucking characters that I've ever seen in a movie. And I'm not exaggerating that point. She really is one of the most unlikable characters that I've seen in a film. Now, not only is Mary Jane completely damaged as a character, but so is Peter Parker. He's gone from a character that's gone through a lot of things, some changes and things like that, to a character who cries like a fucking bitch at the end of the movie. And actually does take Mary Jane back, despite how poorly she has treated him. And he shows more sympathy for a fucking criminal than he really should. And it's fucking criminal what they do to the character, and it's especially criminal what they do to the alien costume storyline, which should have had its own film. Period. Venom should not have been shoved into this film. This film was already packed enough with Harry Goblin and with Sandman. You did not need to have Venom shoehorned in there, just shoved up your ass like a Venom suppository. You didn't need the Venom suppository, Sony. It was not necessary at all. You didn't need to cram that up this movie's ass and then shit it back out on the screen. But they did. And they fuck up this storyline. They foobar it. They fuck it up beyond all recognition. To the point where it's completely unrecognizable. They completely missed the point on what made the costume and the symbiote so interesting, what made it work. They turned the symbiote into something that just makes Peter emo and makes him dance like a fucking twat. They fuck up Eddie Brock and have him be this anti-Peter Parker, which might have worked if they actually had a fucking clue, but they didn't. And they also had the issue of I still can't even believe it. I mean, really, I'm speechless when I think of the fucking casting when it comes to Eddie Brock, which is one of the worst cases of miscasting that I've ever seen in a film. Really, one of the worst cases of miscasting ever with Topher Grace as Eddie Brock. He's nothing like his comic counterpart. He's a fucking pussy. That's not who Venom should be. It's a fucking disgrace to the character of Venom. And even if that all wasn't bad enough, you then fuck over Venom anyway by killing him at the end of the film. In a way that's just too easy. And just absolutely putrid and pathetic. So, okay, Venom sucks. Peter's turned into a fucking emo bitch. Mary Jane's a bitch. What other problems do we have? Oh, you know, the origin story, you know, where Uncle Ben is murdered by this criminal that Spider-Man hunts down and accidentally kills in the first half of the first movie. Oh, well, fuck all of that, because none of that fucking matters, because we're just going to pull this fucking plot twist out of our ass, or out of our fucking dick hole, that says that Sandman did it. So this not only is insulting and disrespectful to storylines that weren't adapted yet, it's also a slap in the fucking face to storylines that were already established in the first movie. And it's not only... It doesn't stop there, because then you have one of the most royally moronic, absolutely idiotic fucking twists you will ever see in a film. At the end of the film, after Harry has already injected himself with the goblin serum, gotten a pumpkin bomb to the face, and has been disfigured for the rest of his life, his fucking butler then just randomly comes out with this bombshell. Oh, Spider-Man didn't kill your father. He killed himself. Oh, why didn't you fucking tell me that earlier, you fucking dick? I mean, holy shit, Spider-Man 3. And okay, that's bad. What about everything? What about you have the subplot with Harry Osborn itself, which is a fucking failure. Okay? The subplot is something straight out of an episode of Days of Our Lives. What the fuck is up with this amnesia soap opera bullshit? So I mean, you got that. You got the shit with Peter and Mary Jane. And you got a climax, which is a fucking giant clusterfuck, and a bunch of who gives a fuck, because Mary Jane is in danger, and the film has completely made me not give a flying fuck about her character anymore. So there's no suspense. So everything regarding to the story and the script is a fucking fail on an epic fucking scale, in size and in scope. Oh, you also have Gwen Stacy, who's just there for fan service and is completely fucking wasted as a character. But, you know, there's that too. I mean, it just keeps coming. The hits just keep coming. The film just keeps punching me in the dick and punching me right in the balls, just over and over and over and over and over again. This DVD should come with a pack of fucking ice, so you can soothe the pain that your balls, or if you're a lady, your girl parts have suffered via watching Spider-Man fucking 3. Okay, the script, okay, that's shitty. Alright, what else? The action sequences, except for a few exceptions, are really not that much to write home about. Especially the ones in the climax. The score by Christopher Young, who is a great composer, is easily the worst score I've ever heard from him. So the score sucks. The film has miserable pacing. It's overstuffed to the brim. It's a nasty shake with all the wrong ingredients. It's a fucking clusterfuck of a movie. It's boring. It's slow-paced. There's not much suspense or intrigue because the story sucks so much. I guess from a directing standpoint or an editing standpoint, it's okay. It's adequate. But that's extremely disappointing considering what we have seen previously from Sam Raimi in this particular series of films. I just it's still astonishing to me how bad this film is. It really is. And it goes farther than just the emo Peter Parker dancing. Its flaws are much bigger than that. And there are much more flaws than just that, too. So, I don't know what else to say about Spider-Man 3. Spider-Man 3, it sucks spider dick, and it looks spider taint. Fuck Spider-Man 3. Kiss my ass. Now we're on to the first reboot by Sony of the Spider-Man franchise, and that is 2012's The Amazing Spider-Man. Now, I personally like this film a lot more than Spider-Man 3, but that's not saying much. I mean, it's not very hard to be better than Spider-Man 3. I mean, the bar is so fucking low that, I mean, it's almost to the fucking ground. I mean, it's not really that hard to be better than Spider-Man 3. I mean, it's not hard to be better than this either, because at the end of the day, this is just okay. I found this to be pretty average and mediocre, which is more than I could say for Spider-Man 3, because Spider-Man 3 makes me want to web my fucking eyes shut to make sure I can't fucking see anything anymore, so I can end the fucking pain. I don't feel that way about The Amazing Spider-Man. I actually like Andrew Garfield as Peter Parker and as Spider-Man. I think he's a much better Peter and a much better Spider-Man than Tobey Maguire. He's not as much of an uber nerd. He's not as much of a fucking dweeb. He's not as much of a fucking dork as Tobey's Peter is. He's not Clark Kent. He's different. He actually feels like there's something different about him. Could I deal without the skateboarding shit? Like he's Tony Hawk or whatever? Yeah, I could deal without that. I mean, that's something I could do without. That being said, I still don't. I think Andrew Garfield's actually quite good in the role. I like a few of his lines. He has more charisma in his left nut than Tobey Maguire has ever had in any of the Raimi films. I don't really like this suit design. I think that's definitely an issue. I think Spider-Man 3, had better costumes when it comes to that. This film carries over some of the same problems Spider-Man 3 had in terms of weak villains. But thankfully it's just one. We just have to deal with the Lizard, which is disappointing because the Raimi films were all building up to the Lizard, because you had Dr. Connors in a lot of the films and they did nothing with him. I don't know why Spider-Man 3 wasn't just the Lizard. And just the Lizard alone. And no Hairy Goblin, no fucking Venom, none of that shit. None of that vile, rank bullshit. But, hey, we get the Lizard in this, and it looks like a fucking steroid-ridden Goomba from the Super Mario Brothers movie, which is disappointing. I didn't mind the way that they retooled the origin story. It still felt somewhat fresh. I like the casting of Sally Field and Martin Sheen as Uncle Ben and Aunt May. I thought the casting of Emma Stone as Gwen Stacy was perfect, and I liked that they had her in high school and had this sort of relationship build that early on. And I thought it was a very sweet and heartwarming love story, and I thought it was very genuine, and I personally think that was one of the strongest points of this film and of this entire franchise, was the relationship between Gwen and Peter. I actually bought that these two fell in love with each other, and I bought that there was a lot of chemistry between the two. I liked the high school scenes. I thought it actually felt like it was an actual high school. I related to some of the things that were shown in the film. I also thought the action sequences when they were there were actually well done. I thought Mark Webb's direction was actually quite good. I would even dare say it was better than the direction by John Watts in Homecoming. I really do feel that way. John Watts' direction is weak. It's fucking weak sauce. I'll talk about that more later. The whole sort of stuff where they talk about Peter's parents, I didn't mind that either, because it was a nice thing to talk about that the Raimi films didn't even mention at all. So I didn't mind that personal choice. I thought it added some more intrigue to the plot. Kind of made the idea of a reboot kind of something that didn't feel like it was completely pointless to me. The climax could definitely use some work. I thought the whole stuff with the lizard turning people into lizards, and it was kind of clunky. And it's just one of those things that was just like, the stuff with the crane was just way too convenient. To the point where it was just honestly pretty laughable. It really was. It was pretty laughable, to be perfectly honest, the stuff with the crane and C. Thomas Howell. Dennis Leary was fine as Gwen Stacy's dad, the little bit that he was in the film. I liked the whole carjacking scene where Spider-Man confronts a carjacker. I thought that was actually pretty funny. Captured Peter's wit really well. But, it might seem like I'm not saying that much about it, because there really isn't that much to say. I mean, the score by, I think it was James Horner. Yeah, the score by James Horner. Not one of my favorite scores of his, but it's okay. It's there. Kind of fits the whole quality of the film. The film is just there. It's average. It's a decent, alright time waster for me. A meh origin story. Could have been better. Could have been a lot worse. At least for me personally. I don't think this is as bad as a lot of people say it is. I thought it was going to be going into it both times that I've seen it. And both times that I've seen this film, I feel the exact same way about it. I just think it's an okay average movie. I can have some fun with it, with particular certain sequences. There are certain things about it that I like, that I appreciate, and there's other things that I don't. I hate the lizard, and I love the lizard as a character. I've always been a fan of the lizard, and it was a real nut punch to see the lizard finally on film in live action in a Spider-Man movie, and for it to be this fucking monstrosity, this fucking Goomba looking motherfucker who's saying stupid shit. Poor Parker, poor puny Peter Parker, poor Parker, poor Peter. Shut the fuck up. The lizard shouldn't be talking. I mean, it's ridiculous enough that you have this humanoid lizard man. I don't need to hear him fucking making monologues and fucking speeches. So, yeah, that's easily one of the worst things about it. I also personally thought Stan Lee's cameo was one of the worst I've seen in a Marvel movie. It just felt distracting. Unlike all of the other Stan Lee cameos, this one just felt extremely forced to me. It was just like, oh, let's stop a fight between Spider-Man and the Lizard for the Stan Lee cameo. It was just like, oh, come on now. You really could have handled that a lot better. But, you know, I still say I like the film okay. I like The Amazing Spider-Man okay. It's not amazing. It's not great. But it's okay. It's alright. It's the mediocre Spider-Man. Now we're on to The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Which, I revisited this film, and I still like this film. I still like it. I actually think this is the second best Spider-Man film after Spider-Man 2. I still feel that way. I even said that when I reviewed the franchise a while back. So my feelings on when it comes to that are still the same. But I don't think this is a 4-star flick anymore, 4.5-star flick. There's a lot more flaws that I noticed on the more recent viewing. It's a film that I kind of, to be honest, my opinion on it is the same as Batman Forever. That's a film I reviewed a long time ago and I wasn't that keen on, but over the years, I've learned to enjoy it and I find it entertaining despite its flaws. So I think that's a good example because this film is at best just above average because of all these other issues. It's jam-packed of way too many storylines and way too many characters, way too many villains. It ends up copying the same fucking pages as Spider-Man 3 did and Batman and Robin. I don't know what they were thinking with that. The Rhino didn't need to be in this. Another Hairy Goblin didn't need to be in this. You should have just had Electro and that's it. I mean, don't jam-pack your Spider-Man films with 3 villains. It doesn't work. It didn't work here. It didn't work here either. But this was entertaining to me, which is a big difference when it comes to comparing the two. I mean, this was fucking boring and pissed me off and made me angry. This was entertaining despite its problems. And there are issues, and I'll talk about them soon enough. But I want to talk about some of the things about it that I do feel are actually quite good. They're overlooked. I do not feel this is one of the worst comic book films ever. I don't think this is the Batman and Robin of Spider-Man films. That dishonor goes to Spider-Man 3. I don't think this is one of the worst Marvel movies ever or comic book films ever. I've seen much worse than this. So, there are things about it that I think really are, quite honestly, I personally think great. For one, this costume is still, in my opinion, the best live-action Spider-Man costume to date. I mean, it's got the eyes down perfect. I love this suit. If anything is extremely underrated about this movie, it's this suit. Also, Andrew Garfield and his performance. There were so many moments in this film, and I don't remember the quotes off the top of my head, but there were so many moments in the film where I felt like I was watching a comic come to life. And when that happens, you know that there's something something in this script that's being done correctly by Alex Kurtzman, Robert Orci, and Jeff Pinkner. There's something that they're getting right. And that spoke a lot to me. And I think that went a long way when it came to my overall view or my rating of the film in the past. But that being said, I'm willing to look past some of that and accept more of the film's flaws and, put them in the film's rating. This film has a lot of flaws, and those flaws are why it doesn't rise above anything other than above average. It's entertaining. I can enjoy the film, but it is a bit too overstuffed. It's got too many things going on. It's a bit too long. There's too many subplots. There's a lot of stuff that should have been cut out of the film. The stuff with Electro, I don't mind Jamie Foxx. I don't mind the effects. I don't mind some of the fight scenes with Spider-Man versus Electro. I think they're actually quite well done. The problem is the motivation. I do agree now, after watching it again, the motivation does seem pretty weak. They could have fleshed that out a little bit more. And also, I just feel that what they give Electro to do, it amounts to jack shit. It really does. It's just not very much at all. And the lines of dialogue they give him are cringe-inducing, so they don't do a lot to really make him a villain that is intimidating or a villain that should be reckoned with. Maybe just Electro, but maybe you should have cut Electro out and just kept Dane DeHaan's Goblin. Because, yeah, he looks like Beavis. he looks like Beavis from Beavis and Butthead, but I personally think the way they handled this was actually decent, and if they just focus on that, I think they might have had something in terms of a villain, but they decided to go with Electro and the Goblin, and decided to have their cake and eat it too, and it didn't really work out that well. But, I mean, Electro and Goblin and Rhino, to me, pale in comparison in terms of their annoyance factor versus the annoying fucking scientist guy. He was a mad scientist who was just annoying. He was a fucking dipshit. And I hated every scene he was in. And it was even more glaringly obvious when I watched this again. I still think Andrew and Gwen still have wonderful chemistry with each other. I do feel now, though, that the death of Gwen Stacy was a bit heavy-handed in terms of how it was handled in this movie. But I like the action sequences. I like the moments where Spider-Man is embracing his roots and being the protector for his city, and he's being the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. I like that. I think the film has some really nice, fun lines of dialogue that are, to me, the best that I've seen in a Spider-Man film to date. And Andrew's line delivery is great. I think he's a genuinely witty guy, and you can tell that he's extremely passionate about playing Spider-Man, and it shows. It's a very endearing performance in this film for me, Andrew Garfield's performance as Peter and Spider-Man. The whole stuff with his parents being revealed and the whole, he was destined to be Spider-Man, I didn't really hate it. I know I should, but I didn't. I actually thought it was actually kind of interesting. Amidst all this other chaos in this plot and all these in this script, that was an interesting thing to me. I don't agree with the whole thing where Spider-Man gets, his parents, his dad shows up alive in a deleted scene. I'm glad they didn't put that back in the movie. And the whole sort of convenience of some of the stuff wasn't really the best. It wasn't really the best, like the stuff with the coins and the calculator. But the concept I didn't mind. I did not hate the concept of that. Like I said, I actually did not mind Dane DeHaan as Harry. I actually thought he was pretty good. I think the film needed a little bit of a tighter pace. It's a bit too long. I think I've said that before. It's a very overstuffed film, and it's bursting at the seams with all these different subplots, and you need to cut a few out. I like the score. I've always, I have warmed up to some parts of the score, like the news, the main theme that kind of sounds like a news, the theme for the nightly news. I've warmed up to that. And if you're hearing any yard work back there, my neighbors are working on something. I don't know what they're doing. They're probably, chainsawing something. I don't know what it is. But yeah, I don't mind the score. I actually liked it when I first saw the film. I thought it was actually a pretty fun score. And yeah, I mean, the effects wise, it's pretty. I thought the effects were pretty good too. The visuals, the visual effects. It's a nice looking film. I thought Mark Webb's direction was pretty solid as well. But yeah, I mean, it's with the plots and with the different characters. I mean, that's one of the main problems of the film. It's just it's got too much going on. It needed to be more focused. And if it was more focused, I think it would have been a better film. But that being said, I still like the movie. I think it's an entertaining movie, and I actually think it's actually quite underrated. And you can twist my arm all you want for this, but I'll take this over Homecoming, and I'll explain why in the next video. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this longer than I thought it was going to be thoughts on episode on Spider-Man films. It's just one of those things where, yeah, I'm not as detailed as I was with some of my other reviews of these movies, but time just kind of gets away from me a little bit, and a lot of it was devoted to trying to talk about the '70s show and ranting on Spider-Man 3. That movie just pisses me off so much. I don't know what it is about the film that just irritates me to the fiber of my fucking being, but it just does. And but either way, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. And stay tuned for my review with some ranting on Spider-Man Homecoming. Thanks for watching, and as always, I will see you guys later. See ya.